A real pleasure to be able to be here today and talk about this book that I've just had published, came out in January. So it's called Finding Wholeness Through the Science of Connecting. And so it uses systems theory, which I call the science of connecting, as a way of understanding how we get on as human beings, how we relate to other people. And so the things that we can learn by recognising the patterns of how we connect and disconnect in our lives can be really useful. A general outline of where we're heading today is that I will talk a little bit about myself and my history, and that will sort of lead into the book and what it's about. I also have two previous books that I've self-published, and announcement I can finally make now that only happened about 2 or 3 days ago is that my next book has been approved by the Rutledge Press, so there will be another book coming out, hopefully, well, ideally by the end of the year, but the way things work out will probably be into next year. Hey, come on in. Whoa. Excellent. Yes, so just welcome to everybody. So, yeah, I'm here to talk about the book that I've just had published and sort of mentioning, as I've just mentioned, that I've just recently heard that my next book, that Rutledge have agreed to publish that, and I'm busy writing the book following that, so there's a lot happening at the moment, which is, yeah, really good. I'm really pleased to be able to be doing it. Yeah, so I thought I would start off and just talk a little bit about myself and yeah, how I came to be writing this book. So I was born in Wellington, but at the age of 3 months I was brought over here to Nelson, so I was brought up in Nelson, just down from the hospital. And I stayed here. Then I was about 18, I went down to Christchurch to go to university. And when I was there, I did Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Māori Studies. And a few years after that, I shifted down to Dunedin, and I was down there for 25, 26 years, a couple of years in Australia, and I came back to Nelson in my late 50s, and I've been here for 12, 13 years since then. So when I started working, my first jobs were I was working on unemployment work schemes. So that sort of social work type thing is what I've been working on for it's about 45 years if you add it all up now that I've been doing that. And about just over 20 years ago, I got a job working as a probation officer down in Dunedin. And so I was working there as a probation officer, and I did that for about 3 or 4 years, and then I shifted to running programs on living without violence within the prisons and some of the community through the corrections department. Then about 12 years ago I shifted back here to Nelson, and I got a job with what is now called Rise Living Safe, and that's working more specifically in the area of family violence. And so, yeah, you know, that's a big, strong thread in my life, and just particularly interested in well, actually, the central question that I'm working with in my life is how can we as human beings learn to live without using violence to resolve conflict between each other. And then in 1995, I saw a television program. And the television program was, it was called The Colours of Infinity by Arthur C. Clarke. So I'm just sort of going back a little bit, but some people might remember him. And he was talking about fractals. And so a fractal is a pattern that keeps on repeating in nature. So if you look at a tree, you will see that the general shape of the tree is the same shape of a little tiny twig. And it gets repeated over and over. And all through nature, we've got these patterns where things get repeated at different levels. And that opened a whole new world to me, so that whole world of fractals, chaos theory, and that linked into complexity theory, and it all sort of fits under systems theory. And so, yeah, as I explained a little bit before, systems theory is all about how things connect and how they disconnect. So a system is something where the parts within it interact together in a way that they create something bigger, something whole, that can do things that the individual parts couldn't do. So the ideal example of that is a human body. I've got a heart, I've got lungs, bones, brain, all of those different things. By themselves, none of them can do very much. In fact, they can't even survive without all the others. But when they cooperate, work together within the constraints, so we've got our blood pressure, our blood temperature, all of those things have to be kept within certain limits. But if that happens, we come together as a whole human being. Similarly, we come together as groups of people. And so, as individuals, we can do certain things, but if we come together as a group, we can achieve more things. But there's always trade-off. There's always a trade-off in how we work things. So we gain by coming together, but as soon as we come closer together, there's conflicts that arise that didn't exist when we were separate. And so it's a balance between the conflict of me wanting to be who I am and I don't want anybody to tell me what to do, and that thing of I want to come together and cooperate with people and belong to the group of people. So system theory is all about those sort of little conflicts and how we work with them and how we make them work. And so what I found for me was that actually gave me a way of making sense of the things that I had been noticing, the patterns that I'd been noticing. And so particularly in my earlier years, I had sort of quite a spiritual focus on using spirituality to understand the world. And what I found was that systems theory just bridged hard science and spirituality in a way that just really made sense for me. I kept on working at that. So this was back in 1995, so the internet was only just up and going at that stage. And there was this guy in Manchester that we started sending messages backwards and forwards to, and he had this really amazing website. Well, for those days it was an amazing website. These days it'd be pretty humdrum. But he, and he sent me this email that said, it looks like you're from New Zealand, from your email address. And I said, oh yeah. And he said, well, where do you live? And I said, I'm in Dunedin. And he said, oh, well, I've been invited to come to a system theory conference in Dunedin. I'm going to be a speaker there. And so I hadn't heard about it at all, but from what he gave me, I phoned up and found out about it, and I was able to attend that conference. So that was the first one that I went to, way back now. And once I got sort of on the mailing list and things, I started hearing about other events, other conferences that were on. And in particular, I made contact with the International Society for the System Sciences. And so now, we're going to be heading off in a few weeks to another conference, which is going to be in Birmingham. And I've been to, I think it's about 16 or 17, it must be by now. Some of those have been online, particularly over the COVID years, things sort of stopped. But it's put me in contact with pretty much the top systems scientists in the world that are friends. It's really amazing that can happen like that. And so, lots of contact with them. And then I brought that up and started to make it a bit more academic. I did an MA in, what was it? It was, I can't remember the name now, but it sounded really quite marvellous, through the University of Western Sydney. And then I did a PhD, which I finished in 2017 through the University of the Sunshine Coast. And that is using systems theory as a way of analysing. And I was analysing, some of you will know, convergence gathering. The topic of that was, so convergence gathering is, one of the things that's quite special about it is it doesn't have a hierarchy of people in charge. And so I was looking at how well that works or doesn't work, and using systems theory for that. So that finished 2017. After 2017, it was okay, where do I go next? And I thought, okay, it's time to write a book. So that's when I started writing the book. I wanted to call it Reconnect. That's the name. I thought that's punchy, short. But the publishers, so Rutledge is an academic press, and so they wanted to go with the name Finding Wholeness to the Science of Connecting, which tells you a lot more about it, but it, there's a sort of different feel to it. So that's the book. Now, 1995, I also self-published my first book, which is this one over here. I've got a few copies. And this first book that I did, When the Dragon Stirs, is all about using fairy stories and or fairy tales and myths as a way of getting in touch with emotional healing. So it's using meditation techniques and understanding the symbols that are hidden in fairy stories and myths that we can use. So that was called When the Dragon Stirs, Healing Our Wounded Lives Through Fairy Stories, Myths and Legends. And then I've got another one which is out of print now, which was called Gonna Lay Down My Sword and Shield. And then finally we come to Finding Wholeness Through the Science of Connecting. And so the next book that I've just heard that Rutledge will be publishing is really a 30-year update on this book. So because when I wrote this one, I hadn't even heard of systems theory. So, the book has added a huge number of dimensions to the whole sort of, the Jungian archetypes and the healing that can come from that. And the book that I'm now working on, I'm calling the equality paradox, which is all about equality is a nice, easy concept that we all think is a good thing that we should have. But when you sit down and you have a look at how do I actually turn that into something real in our lives, it becomes a lot more of a problem. So you look at all the societies that have existed in the last 5,000-10,000 years. I don't know, I mean, I'm trying to find even just one that you really call a society where equality and equity and everything is holding. And I haven't come up with one. And it's sort of, what's going on that we just can't do that? So that's sort of, the plan of what I'm looking at coming up. But anyway, getting back to the Finding Wholeness Through the Science of Connecting. I quite like it if anybody's got any questions or comments as we go to bring them up now. I think that's sort of better interaction than questions at the end. So yeah.
Did you discover any correlation between effectiveness that having something that is equal and cooperative and working well, and gender? I suspect that the women's communities were more harmonious than the male ones.
It's highly contentious.
Okay.
It's a really it's a really interesting one that I'm grappling with, and everybody's got a different opinion on that.
It's just that the word Amazon came to mind.
Right. For sure. I suspect if women were in charge in the way that men tend to be in charge now, there would be other problems that would turn up rather than the ones that we've got. And which way would be the best, I'm not sure. But ultimately, men and women getting on is actually what we want to do. We want to get that thing, rather than one dominating over the other. Cool. I have worked for Rise Living Safe now for about 12 years, so I'm doing a lot of one-on-one work with clients looking at how they can live with a life without violence. Probably 2/3 of the people that I'm working with have been sent by the court to do a program, so they're not there because they want to be. And about 1/3 probably are there because they can recognise a change that they need to do in their lives. So one-on-one or in a group program. And so, right from the beginning, as I was doing the program, initially the what you had to tell people was quite structured. And it was, session 1 you will talk about this, and session 2, session 3. And then there came a point where they sort of recognised that there were disadvantages with making it so structured. And so they gave us a lot more freedom to develop the program in our own individual way. And once I got that, I was off. and so I was just constantly looking at, how can I use systems, ideas, and concepts as a way to actually, to connect and give people the tools that they're going to find helpful in their lives. Most of it has taken off my one-on-one sessions with people. And so it's a 10-session program, the full program. The first couple of sessions is all about how our brain works, and because the way that our brain has evolved, as wonderful and amazing as it has created certain weaknesses and things that tend to create problems. And if there's one that stands out, particularly looking at it from a family violence point of view, is that we tend to respond from our emotions rather than from our whole brain working together. So the book is, and so the book is designed primarily, the publishers want you to define your niche as to who are the people, and so the book is written particularly for psychologists, counsellors, social workers, life coaches, that sort of thing. But everything that's in the book has come from me talking to very ordinary people. And so, constantly I'm trying to find, how can I take a complex systems theory idea and turn it into something that a very ordinary, everyday person can pick up and use. So it means that the book is actually, I would certainly hope, quite usable by anybody. Anyone can pick up and read and gain and learn, from what is in the program. So the first couple of sessions is sort of laying the foundation. Then we have a session on thinking patterns, one on beliefs and values. We have a session looking at emotions, one looking at relationships, empathy, accountability, forgiveness, and the final session is sort of a review session. Guy Pennant, while he's here, so that one of the key concepts in the book is about a forgiveness process. Dr. Guy Pennant, who's here, I did a workshop with him many years ago, and it was a full weekend where we went through this process of taking all the important people in our lives and going through and doing different exercises to get in touch with the emotions that we haven't been able to embrace and work with at the time, and going through a process of releasing that so that we can free ourselves and not get sabotaged by things from the past coming back in. So I'm incredibly thankful that I had that opportunity, and incredibly thankful that I'm able to turn that into something that I can pass on to other people. But my challenge was, how do I take a process that took a whole weekend and squash it into 1 hour? And one of the difficulties that it creates is that when you're doing a whole weekend, you've got plenty of time to open up the emotions, feel them, and work with them, and pack it down nicely so that you can walk away in a really good space. When I've only got an hour, the risk is that I can open people up, but packing it back down again in an hour can be a challenge. So years ago, I did a workshop on the meeting your dragon, and we did a forgiveness process, working on recognising the dragons in our lives and healing them. And there was a woman after it who was driving home, and she just driving along the road, and I think it was probably at 100 k's, and then just burst into tears. And so she had to pull over to the side of the road, and I actually stopped doing the workshop for years after that. I just thought, I can't do that and put people at that level of risk. I felt a little bit more confident again. So I'm very clear to give people a conversation that just says, we've had time to open stuff up. You might find the situation where emotions come up again, later on, and if they do, recognise what they are and just allow yourself to work with them. And also, I am very. We don't dig deeply into the emotion in the 1 hour. So what we do is that we create a forgiveness sentence, which would be something like. Jack used to be violent to me. He did this and this and this and this, and these are the emotions that I felt and haven't been able to handle as a result of what happened. I now choose to release those emotions, and I'll just get people to repeat that sentence 3 times. For most people that's quite straightforward, and for some people you just hit them and it's it can be really quite magical to actually see it happen like that. So that's sort of one little chapter of the book, and one of the key.
So it brings up a question.
Yeah.
When you say 3 times, is that enough if I say it 3 times, or do I have to say 3 times every day for like a period of time, or
yeah? Ideally you would. The problem is if you're going to do that in your own time, you don't have anybody checking to make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
So we do it in that one and then telling people about it. But if you move forward with a full weekend where you do get the time to go into it deeply, that's very, very powerful. Yeah. Okay, so that's just sort of the book and where it comes from. You may be able to do a financial play while I'm here. So I do have copies of the book. Unfortunately, it's a bit more expensive than I was hoping, but I didn't get a say over that. I can sell copies for $50. If you go online through the publishers, Rutledge, they sell them for $56. And one of the main reasons I think why it's so expensive is that they offer worldwide free postage. So I think that is sort of part of the reason of why that is. And I've got copies of my original book going back to 1995 when I wrote it for $20. So if you're interested in that, you just come up and see us later. And while I'm advertising, Saturday the 24th, I have an afternoon workshop, 12 noon to 6 p.m. at the Victory Centre, and we'll be going into a lot more depth into the concepts and ideas that we're going to be talking about. So if that suits, and a website, victormcgill.com, and that has got lots of other articles and information there. And if you go in there, put your email in there, then anything new that comes up, you can hear about them. Okay. So what this shows is 4 levels of our mind, and so our brain and our mind has evolved over many millions of years, and there are levels that we have evolved through that are actually written into the brain structures that we have. Okay, and so right at the bottom, and so in the bottom of our brain, down in there, we have the survival brain, and so that is the part of the brain that does the immediate survival thing. So blood pressure, body temperature, all of those sort of things. It manages those. If anything goes wrong with that part of the brain, more likely than not you're going to die because it's the really vital stuff. Also within that survival brain is the fight or flight mechanism. So fight or flight is the mechanism that we have that if we are in a place of threat, where we, particularly if we feel like our life is under threat, we have an automatic instinctual response to either fight or run away. And sometimes that is called the fight, flight, freeze response, because sometimes that early, the most primitive response when you're under threat is a freezing, where your body slows down, and the possum in the headlights, and so if I don't move, maybe you won't notice me. So it's better than doing nothing, but it's not a terribly wonderful survival strategy. But what happens is your body slows down. It means that if you want to pretend that you're dead, you can do it a lot more effectively, and if you're attacked, you don't bleed as much. Okay, but then we've got the fight or flight on top of that, and so generally a wild animal's choice will be to run away if it possibly can. This is the safest option. If they recognise they can't go anywhere, they will stand and fight. And if they realise that they are going to die, they'll move into freeze. Okay. So the instinctual level measures time in seconds. It's how do I stay alive for the next 10 seconds. This is sometimes called the reptile brain. And it's called the reptile brain because that's basically the whole brain of a reptile. Okay, now our human brain, the reptile part of our human brain is quite different from a reptile brain because our brain has to connect in with so many other higher parts. But it fulfills much of the same functions. Okay, so I think about 300 million years ago, I think the sort of reptiles came, but after those we have mammals. And the thing that mammals have is that they can feel emotions. And emotions on their own generally are quite fleeting. They will come and go. So whereas the survival brain measures time in seconds, the emotional brain tends to measure time in minutes. If somebody's really happy, crying, sad, or anything like that, it doesn't usually last more than a minute or two. And particularly if you look at children, because children haven't developed the higher thinking brain very much, so they're very much coming out of the emotional brain. And you can just watch children going from emotion to emotion to emotion really, really quickly. And inside this part of your brain also is where we establish habit patterns. Habit patterns are really important because it is through the brain uses a habit pattern because it uses less energy. It's a lot easier to activate a habit pattern than it is to do something right from scratch. So if you think of the time when you were young and you were learning how to tie your shoelaces, the first time you do it, it was really, really difficult to do. You had to think of the loops and it was really, really hard to get it right. But once you've got that, you've done it a few times, your brain turns out into a habit pattern and it becomes really automatic. And so you don't need to think about it, it just automatically happens. And for most things that we do, the tying your shoelaces, putting your clothes on, making a cup of coffee, all of those everyday things, habit patterns are absolutely, all that we need to do it. And so, if something is pretty simple, and if you get it wrong, it doesn't really matter. If you mess up tying your shoelaces, you just got to do it again. It's not a big deal. But every now and then we're in situations where they are quite complex, where if things go wrong, they really go wrong. And when that happens, we need to use the higher functions of our brain to make sure we're going to make the best response. So sometimes the emotional brain and the survival brain are put together and called the red brain. So that comes from the work of Bruce Perry. And so this is sort of the reactive, emotional part of our brain, and that is, it's a short term. It's focusing on how do I feel right now, what is my instinctual action that I want to do right now. And we need to know how I feel about something if I'm going to make a decision about it. But if we only make a decision based on what's happening right now, it's not probably going to be a very good decision that we come to. So that then led to the thinking brain coming up. Okay, so the thinking brain sits just behind our forehead. Okay, and what you notice if you have a look at the brain of a chimpanzee, instead of their forehead going up like that, it comes back like that. Okay, and that's because they don't have the prefrontal cortex where the thinking happens. It's not anywhere near as developed as it is with us in human beings. So even though chimpanzees can be pretty smart, they've certainly done things like taught chimpanzees, gorillas, sign language, and they can understand it for about 200 characters. But if your car breaks down, a chimpanzee is never going to fix it. So, yeah, okay. So thinking, what happens with thinking? What happens with thinking is it gives us a future. I can imagine things that haven't happened and imagine what might happen, and that gives us a much more useful information for making decisions. Okay, so whereas my emotional brain might be, this person is talking to me, they're really annoying the hell out of me, I really feel like just getting up and whacking them up and shutting them up. And that would be what your red brain would be telling you. The thinking brain and the social brain, which we'll get to next, are often put together and called the green brain. Okay, and so my red brain says hit the guy. My green brain says, yeah, but if you do that, someone's going to call the police. You're probably going to end up in the cells. You could lose your job, and that would have a really negative impact on the family and the people around you. Maybe I need to do something different. Okay, but we absolutely need an emotional brain in order to have a thought. Okay, and thinking is about making decisions. Okay, so if I asked you all, if for tea tonight, for dinner tonight, you had the choice between fish and chips and pizza, who would go for a pizza? Right? And I assume the others would go for fish and chips. Nah. Fair enough. Okay. In order to answer that question, you had to ask, what does it feel like when I eat pizza? What does it feel like when I eat fish and chips? And then compare the two. Okay? So you had to have a feeling and emotion before you could make a thinking decision about it. Okay? So, yeah. So, some of the psychological things tend to have thinking just sort of appearing out of nowhere in our brain. But actually thinking can only happen by the interconnectedness of the whole thing. So if we're making a decision, first of all we want to know, am I safe? Am I going to die? No, I'm feeling safe enough. What is the feeling that I have? What are the social implications of what I'm thinking of? And then I can come back. And so the thing that I use quite a lot is notice the feeling, then stop and think about the answer that you want. Okay, because so many of the people that I'm working with, it's just I feel angry, I react. And so just getting that thing to just stop a little, take even just a little bit of time to stop and think about what does this mean. Because the red brain is much, much quicker. It operates really, really quickly. And so what we want to do is to at least have enough time for the green brain to catch up to it, so that you can make a good decision. And some decisions need a good amount of time. Now, I said thinking is all about looking into the future. And so, now if I'm walking along the road and there's a big hole in the road, I don't wait until I'm falling in the hole to do something about it. Okay, what I do is that I will recognise there's a hole in the road. Falling in the road is not going to be very good for my overall well-being. Maybe I want to look at what the alternatives are. So we will project and imagine different futures and come up with some options as to what we can do. Obvious one is just walk around it. If it's really, really big, you might just turn around and go home. There might be some other thing that you can do, but we are constantly looking into the future to predict what might happen. And so the better that we can use those skills of predicting what what might happen, the more likely it is we make a good, a good choice. The next layer up, which is also centered in the prefrontal cortex, is our social skills. And our social skills come from, if you go back into early human groups, it's about groups of people coming together and making shared agreements about how they're going to see and understand the world that they live in. And shared agreements about what is okay to do and what is not okay to do. Okay? So the social brain is all about empathy, it's about compromise, it's about talking, and taking other people into account. So an interesting, we've some of the rules that we have created for ourselves are written into the law. So things that you can do, it's illegal, you can't do it. But we've got heaps and heaps of other things which are things that have part of the culture that we're brought up with. Okay, and we use them so often we don't notice that we're doing them. Okay, so if I'm walking past somebody on the street, I make sure they've got room to so we're not going to bump into each other. We don't think about it, but actually it's a part of the process of getting on with ourselves and other people. If you look at chimpanzees, baboons, gorillas, creatures like that, in the wild, they generally live in groups of up to about 50. Because if the group gets bigger than that, the level of conflict just goes out of hand. And what will usually happen is it'll break into two groups. As human beings, particularly, we've got language that we can use. There's a whole heap of problems that we can resolve if we can talk to each other. But because we've got all of these rules about how we do things, we can live together in millions. Not always perfectly, but enough to get on. And so, all of those rules. And so, when we do something, part of what goes on in the back of our head is, what will other people think of me if I do that? And so basically what we're saying is the best outcome for us is when we're using our whole brain together. When we're checking that we're safe, we know what the feeling is, we're taking social implications in, and we're thinking about what the best thing is to do. Okay, any questions, thoughts? Yeah?
Yeah, one question is the idea of going with your gut. You know what I mean? That idea of a gut sense. Does that relate to what you talked about in that you're going through all those four layers? And that perhaps gives us this, I know it's a bit of a, slang, or not slang, but layman's term maybe. A gut feeling. Is that how you might think about it?
I think there's two things going on. I think there is one gut knowledge which is sitting in the emotional stuff, and it's very much a body reaction. Because most of our emotions come from messages from what's going on in the body. Our body has got its own wisdom. Because if you think, there's plenty of creatures that don't have a brain that get on quite well enough and, make decisions. It's just automatic instinctual stuff. We've got, we have nerve cell complexes in our stomach and our heart, which are bigger than a whole heap of animals out there. So, so obviously a part of the process of cognition actually happens in the body, right, as compared to the brain. The other one that I think goes with that is actually intuition. And I think intuition is where the whole four are just humming together. And when you align yourself with all four parts working together, then you just tap a reservoir of knowledge and understanding. And I think that's the one that we want to build.
With intuition, I've heard it said that that can be akin with habits. So in a way, you've got to be careful that your intuition is not being led astray by not so good habits.
Yeah.
Could you anything
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to say, you know, part of the skill of being effective as a human being is actually being able to distinguish those. What is just coming from my body and isn't. Like intuition. Like when we're coming out of our thinking, we usually have to concentrate and think and work out things to come to an answer. And my experience is if we have an intuition, it just sort of appears out of nowhere in an instant. And that's one of the ways that, if there's a significant new idea that has come out of nowhere really quickly, it's maybe more likely to be an intuition. But it is difficult, and it does take time to recognise all the different the complexity of all the things that we are. So the more that we can work together, the more likely it is that we're going to respond well to things that are happening. The next little thing to move on to is a thing that Lisa Feldman Barrett talks about, and she calls it body budget. So the idea simply about body budget is that our body has only got a certain amount of energy available to it. Same way that, if you've got a bank account, you've got a certain amount of money coming in, and it's your responsibility to spend that money wisely. And if you don't spend it wisely, sooner or later the bank's going to get hold of you and stop your bank account. So, we eat food, drink, stuff like that. We take in the energy. Our brain is 2% of our body by weight, but it uses 20% of the energy. It makes the brain the largest user of energy in the body. And so, the same way that you're always looking to economise in your bank account, our body is always looking at ways to economise on body energy. And what you notice with these 4 levels is that the higher the level you go up, the more energy that it takes. And if you think about it, that's really obvious. I mean, down here it's just, do I fight or do I run? Up here at the social brain, it's if I say that to that person, then their brother is married to his sister, and if I say that, it'll get back to, so it's way, way more complex. The things that you've got to think about in order to work out something at the social level. So one of the things that happens is that, I don't know if it's true or not, but my definition that I've worked out for myself is that trauma is what happens when the demands being put on you by your situation is more than the energy that you've got available to cope with it. And we get flooded by the whole situation. And one of the things that happens when we are in a situation where we are stressed, feeling trauma, unable to cope with the situation, is that the body budget says, where can I economise so that I can cope with this energy-wise? And it says the most expensive place in the whole body is this social brain. So I'll close it down. And that's fine for saving energy, but it means suddenly all of our social skills, the ability to listen to what somebody's saying, the ability to compromise, the ability to show empathy to someone, we've switched it off. So we're now operating out of our thinking brain. And the thinking brain is very prone to getting into an I'm right, you're wrong mode of thinking. So once you're operating out of here, you're a lot more likely to end up in arguments and not being able to find a good resolution. If you still can't pay the bills, you come down to the emotional brain, you're screaming, crying, yelling, all of those sort of things. And if you still can't pay the bill here, you come down here to the lowest level at which we can resolve difference between us and other people, and that's fighting. So, if stress is what turns off our brain, if we do the opposite, we start turning it on again. So anything that induces relaxation, finding calmness, getting away from the source of what's annoying us, using breathing techniques, meditation, whatever, anything that we do there will start to turn our brain back on again so that we're in a better position to make a good decision. I use this image of a horse and coach to just show the way the different parts of our body. So the different parts of the horse and coach relate to different parts of our mind that we've talked about. So it's really just another way of saying what we've talked about. So the horses are like our emotions. Okay? Our emotions are where we get the power and the energy to do things in our life. Okay? And every time we have an emotion, it urges us to act in some way. Okay? So horses are really, really powerful, and if you don't have horses, the horse and coach don't go anywhere. So, we cannot survive without emotions. They are very much a part of us and who we are. But if you just let those horses go where they want to go, what's that going to be like? It's going to be chaos. It's not going to work well. And if you only live your life out of your emotions, your life is going to become chaos. So what you need to do is to have a driver. And the driver is our thinking. So we can use our thinking and our alertness. So you can have an alert driver or you can have a lazy driver. Okay? An alert driver is going to notice all of the things that are happening around, notice what they should be doing. The alert driver is going to notice when the horses are going too fast, too slow, or whatever. Okay? So the driver, so we can use our thinking. So I can, if I can say, oh, hang on, I was getting a bit angry there. Maybe I need to just go and take a break. So we can use our thinking to build our control over our emotions. So the job of the driver is to come tie all the horses up, look after the horses, but the driver gives the instructions and tells the horses when to run and when to not run. So what that means is horses get to do what they want to do. They want to run, they want to be powerful. Horses can also be pretty flighty, too, like our emotions. They see a mouse or something, that will throw them right off. But if we control our emotions through our thinking, then they will take us in a good place, a good direction in our life. The second role of the driver is to look ahead, which means looking into the future, predicting what might happen. So the good driver is going to know if the weather's going to be bad, if there's a detour on the road, if there's a bridge out. Okay, we're going to be alert to these things that might be coming up. You're not going to be the only horse and coach on the road. There's going to be other horses and coaches coming past, which is the social level, And so there's going to be rules of the road you have to obey for everybody to get on. And if you can do that, you can stop, the drivers can have a bit of a chat. And, did you know that this is, the bridge is out, further down, or whatever. So that works really, really well. The coach is our physical body. And so the driver, the driver again has to notice when my physical body, and how am I eating? I've had takeaways 3 nights this week. Oh, maybe I should, stop and do some better cooking or whatever. Maybe I need to get out and exercise. So the driver is noticing that, the coach and are there any wobbly wheels or anything like that. And of course you notice that the body and the emotions and the thinking are all connected together. So that if something happens with one of them, it'll have an impact all the way around. And the final one in here is the passenger. And the passenger relates to our beliefs and values. So if you think about it, whatever beliefs and values you have come to believe and the things that you've valued as important shape the direction of your life and where it's going to head. If making money is your main thing, then you're going to spend your life making money, and other relationship things are going to fall into the background. If your family is your total focus, so whatever your beliefs and values, that will shape the direction and where you're going to head. Now the passenger is the one who tells the driver where to go. Okay? So our beliefs and values determine our direction. If you've got a lazy driver, the driver will just get on the coach and head off to wherever you're saying you want to go. Okay, the smart driver, the alert driver, is going to say, you want to go to Blenheim, the weather hasn't been terribly good around the Rye Valley, the bridge could be out, we might have to take a detour, do you still want to go there? So what happens there is that you have a discussion going on between the driver and the passenger, so we are thinking about our beliefs and values and saying, do my beliefs and values that I hold still take me where I want to go? Okay. Now, when we're young, we don't get a choice about our beliefs and values. Whatever happens in the world around us, whatever the adults tell us is how the world is, that's what we just absorb. Okay? As adults, the big thing that we have then is that we have the capacity to change our mind, to say, I used to believe this, but now actually I choose not to believe that anymore. I choose to believe something else. And you're choosing another destination as to where the horse and coach is going to head. So it's really, 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 really powerful. So all through here, there's ways that we can improve things so that we end up making better decisions in our lives. And in a way, you could say the only power we have over our life is to make decisions. And if we make better decisions, we will create better lives. And maybe that's a good place to stop. Unless there's other questions or comments.
I can ask one question.
Yep.
Maybe it's a bit fundamental, but the title of the book refers to the science of connecting.
Yep.
Is that really primarily to the 4 elements you talked about in this slide, connecting those, or is it the science of connecting?
Right. Yeah. Well, the amazing thing about this systems theory is that it can be applied to so many different things. But as I said, basically a system is a group of parts that work together to create a bigger whole. Now that can be my body parts creating a whole out of me, it can be a group of people that I'm with, it can be computers on a network, it could be cars on the highway, it could be seagulls flying, it could be anything.
Sure, but does your book actually use certain
well, my book focuses on how can we use those patterns in nature to improve our ability to cope as human beings. Yeah, and so those other things are there. And they're important, but that's my focus is to how can I use that particularly, and in my work, when I've got a client in front of me, how can I use those? And you can see that this is all about parts working together to make a whole. So I'm constantly looking for those patterns and what breaks the horse and coach up and what helps it to get to its destination.